You're in Studio C with Jason G assisting you, and you're mixing Ghostface Killah. RZA is the producer. Name Dropping Friday, I'm going to call it. Last week I did one. I'm going to do one right now. Last week I did a Name Dropping Friday. Who did I talk about? I talked about Bukovac, a couple other things. This is kind of loose, of course. It's me having a coffee, late afternoon, early evening, whatever you want to call it. Don't have much of a voice. I think it's a little bit of allergies or lack of sleep, because that has been an issue lately. But anyway, welcome aboard. I wanted to talk for a second about, on the screen there is Ghostface Killah and Big Daddy Kane. Two early names in my career in New York City, as I arrived at the Hit Factory in New York as a staff engineer. One of the first names I heard mentioned was Big Daddy Kane. He was working on a record. I was trying to figure out which one it was by looking at his discography, but I can't really figure it out. A friend of mine was assisting on the record. He was an assistant engineer, and he was telling some rather sordid stories about how wild Big Daddy Kane was. Well, Big Daddy Kane now is, I guess we're talking almost 30 years later, 29 years later. He must be pushing 60, and he's in this video here, he's like a cool old gent, still doing the hip hop. And he's hanging out with Ghostface Killah. And Ghostface, for me, was an interesting one because I had just come off of the Michael Jackson session, which was like 11 months of my life that, to some degree, I'll never get back. But I got a call, and my booking manager at the time said, "You're in Studio C," which was building the 237 54th Street. You're in Studio C with Jason G assisting you, and you're mixing Ghostface Killah. RZA is the producer. And then it may have said RZA and various, but I think it was just RZA, actually. So, I mean, I'm going to admit it right now. I didn't realize it until I was watching this interview with Ghostface, was that I started mixing, and it's a whole little bit of a story that's involved. I had never heard Ghostface at the time. I think I may have heard a little bit of Wu-Tang, like Cream or whatever. So I wasn't real familiar with Wu-Tang. And I definitely wasn't real familiar with Ghostface Killah. I had no idea what the hell he even sounded like. So they had apparently been working on this album in Staten Island at their studio. I don't know, it might have been called 36 Chambers. But so this was back in the days of tape. And I got to the session. They were 8 p.m. starts, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., 8 days in a row. So 8 p.m. start. I definitely trickled in there about 7:30. And my assistant Jason, who went on to become an engineer in his own right, and was a cool kid, he was sorting through the tapes, and 2-inch reels of tape. And he said to me, the first thing he said was, "There's no track sheets." So this meant that these 24-track tapes, not only did they have nothing written on the box, but there was no track sheet to even say like what was on each track. So we had to sit and wait. And not long after, I remember that night, I think they were relatively on time, which was definitely unusual. Ghostface and Raekwon showed up. As it turns out, they are always, at that time, they were often together, ran in the same circles, and Raekwon was on quite a bit of the record. The record that I'm talking about is Ironman. Would come to be Ironman. So, you know, the usual chaos. There's a couple of guys show up. One of them's Ghost, one of them's Raekwon. We're sort of getting introduced, but it's not really like a name kind of thing. Like, hey, how you doing? I'm Tony. You know, it was more like, I'm Tony. Hey, what's up? You're the engineer? Yeah, that kind of thing. It was very, you just had to go with the flow, is the only way I could describe it. So anyway, in talking to Raekwon and Ghost, I said, you know, what do you want me to start on? And they're like, what, you know, put up Cam A or something like that, or Daytona 500, or, you know, these are some of the names I remember. And I said, well, there's a problem, is that there's nothing written on anything. So we don't know what the tapes are. So I said, we'll have to put up a tape. I'll push up the faders a little bit, and you can tell me like what the song is and who is who and all that. So there was already this building tension. They were, to some degree, they were mad about the situation they were coming from, because they're like, you know, are you kidding me? The shit's that fucked up. It's like that unorganized. I was like, you know, yeah, I'm sad to say, you know, I'm sorry to say that, yeah, it's not exactly like the most organized thing in the world. So anyway, we'd put up a tape. I'd throw up some faders, hit play, and from what I remember, they just would say, oh, that's Cam A. All right. I said, should I start with this one? They're like, yeah, you could start with that one, whatever. So I was like, I mean, we don't really have a choice unless we go through each tape and figure out what's what. So let's just go one at a time. So we would put up a tape. Typically, there would probably be about, at the most, 15, 16 tracks of sorted loopage and drums and then vocals. And then I would have to put up the fader, and Raekwon was the most helpful. He would tell me, like, that's me. You know, and then we get to the next verse, and I'd put it like, that's Method Man. Yeah, that's Ghost. That's Ghost. And the hook is Ghost. And then I would proceed to start mixing. And one of the funniest things I remember is that Ghostface was like standing behind the console, overlooking, you know, looking at me. I'm like at the faders. Ghostface is on the other side where the speakers are, but he's like leaning over the console. And I'm pushing up the faders, trying to figure out what the hell's going on and everything. And Ghostface just goes, yo, do you know what the fuck you're doing? And I was like, I hope so. And he goes, word. All right, because the last guy made my shit sound hollow. So we were off to the races. The things I remember about the session, which was, I mean, it's quite a while ago, was that every time they heard a verse, and not long into the whole thing, every time they heard a verse, they'd want to redo their vocals. And then I have to tell them, like, listen, if we redo your vocals, we're erasing the original vocal. We don't care. So we went all about it. We one after the next, we kept re-recording things. 8 days went along. It was like kind of grueling, kind of funny. RZA never showed up until the very end, and he was like, "Oh yeah, let me listen." Okay, word. So anyway, the record comes out eventually. Not long after that, the artwork had already been done, so I got no credit. I got a check, but I got no credit. Some other guy got credit for my mixes, and the guy that mixed it first. And, you know, he probably, you know, maybe he believed he was the one that did the mixes. I have no idea. But for 8 days straight, I mixed Ironman. by Ghostface. And those were the mixes. And because, first of all, they were all new vocals. And I know that for a fact, those are the vocals that wound up on the millions of CDs that sold. Because that thing sold 1 million CDs. That's my Friday night story. I'm sticking with it. Check out this interview. It's pretty cool because Big Daddy Kane and Ghostface Killah are all grown up now. It's called I Got Questions. I think it's Hip Hop Wired is the YouTube channel. And I think my battery is going to die.